You're standing on the dock, the listing open on your phone, and the boat in front of you looks like the dream you've been saving 30 years for. White hull, teak that still glows in the afternoon light, a price that feels almost too kind, and every part of you wants to write that check before somebody else does. Here is what I learned the hard way. The reason sailboats never became as popular as everyone in the 1970s swore they would is not the wind, and it is not the learning curve. It is the money that hides below the waterline, inside boats that were built to be sold, not to last. I know that because I bought one of those boats first, and it cost me almost everything I had set aside for the dream itself. Stay with me. Before this is over, I am going to show you how a run of Valiant 40s built between 1976 and 1981 carried a hidden defect that no polished listing will ever admit to, and how you can spot that same kind of buried trouble on any boat sitting in any yard this week. Whether this is the first cruising boat you have ever chased or the second one you are trading up to, this is the part nobody at the brokerage will ever say out loud. Let me take you back to the first mistake, because it explains everything that follows. I was 49 years old when I handed over $38,000 for a 1979 West Sail 32. If you know the boat, you already know the reputation. Heavy displacement, full keel, a hull you could supposedly sail through a hurricane and live to brag about it. The seller had a binder, actual photographs of the boat crossing to Hawaii in the 1980s. I remember standing in his cockpit thinking I had finally found the honest one, the boat that would never let me down. What I did not understand yet is that the West Sail was never really the problem. My ignorance was the problem. And the whole reason boats like that flood the used market at prices that look like gifts is that an entire generation of dreamers bought them, cruised them for one season, and then spent the next decade slowly bleeding out through the wallet. That is the story of why this sport never went mainstream, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it on any listing you scroll through. Think about the numbers for a second. In the middle of the 1970s, fiberglass changed everything. Suddenly a factory could pop a hull out of a mold in days instead of framing a wooden boat over months. Builders sprang up all over Southern California and the eastern seaboard. Costa Mesa alone had yards cranking out cruising hulls like it was a car plant. Everybody believed sailing was about to become as common as owning a camper. The magazines promised it, the dealers promised it, and then it did not happen. By the middle of the 1980s, dozens of those builders were bankrupt or bought out. The dream collapsed, and the reason is the same reason your dream boat is cheap today. These boats are almost free to buy and brutally expensive to keep. The purchase price is the down payment on a problem, not the solution to one. Here is what my West Sail actually cost me after the handshake. The standing rigging, all the wire and fittings that hold the mast up, was original, 1979 wire. I did not know enough to ask. A rigger looked at it, sucked his teeth, and quoted me $6,200 to replace all of it. Then the deck, that beautiful side deck, had a soft spot near the shrouds, and soft means water had gotten into the balsa core and turned it to wet oatmeal. That repair, done right, was another $9,000. I had bought a $38,000 boat and spent over $15,000 before I ever cast off a dock line. But the rigging and the deck were just the opening bill. The real lesson was about how these boats were sold to me and to you with language designed to make decay sound like character. So let me show you the words that should make you close the listing. When a listing says the boat is a project with great bones, that is code. It means the seller knows exactly what is wrong and is betting you do not. When it says the boat has been lovingly maintained, ask for the receipts, because love is not a haul out and it is not a rigging invoice. I have walked away from more boats over missing paperwork than over anything a surveyor ever found, and every single time I was right to walk. The paperwork is the boat's medical history. No history means you are inheriting somebody else's silence. Here is the part that turns your stomach a little. The people who wrote those optimistic listings were not always lying outright. They were doing something more clever. They were describing the boat the way it looked, not the way it was. A hull can gleam and still be soaked with moisture 2 layers down. A cabin can smell like lemon oil and still hide rot behind the joinery. And the broker who is taking 10% of the sale has no reason on earth to go looking for the trouble that would kill his commission. Therefore, the first rule I wish somebody had screamed at me is this: The prettier the boat looks for the money, the harder you have to hunt for the reason it is cheap. Cheap is never an accident on the water. Cheap is a message. Your job is to decode it before your money is gone, not after. So let us talk about the boats themselves, because not all of them will hurt you equally, and this is where I can save you years. There is a split in the used cruising world that almost nobody explains to a first-time buyer. On one side, you have production boats built to a price point. Think of the big Catalina, Hunter, and later Beneteau and Bavaria lines. Frank Butler, who built Catalina, was a genius at making sailing affordable, and I mean that as real praise. A Catalina 30 from the 1980s got hundreds of thousands of families out on the water who never could have afforded it otherwise. Those boats are wonderful for a weekend on a lake or a coastal hop in good weather. On the other side, you have boats built for bluewater, built heavier, built to cross oceans. The Tayana 37, drawn by Robert Perry. The Cape Dory line, drawn by Carl Alberg with those long overhangs that look like they belong in a painting. The Pacific Seacraft boats. These were built to a standard instead of a price, and they cost more used because they are worth more. Here is the trap. The two kinds of boats can look almost identical in a photograph. Same length, same white hull, same hopeful price. And a first-time buyer standing on the dock cannot tell which one will reward him and which one will drain him. I could not tell. That is exactly how I ended up where I ended up. The single biggest difference you can check without a surveyor is the deck construction. And this is something you can do on your short list this week. Most of these boats have a deck built like a sandwich, fiberglass on top, fiberglass on the bottom, and a core in the middle to make it stiff and light. On thousands of boats from the 1970s and 80s, that core is end-grain balsa wood. Balsa is strong and light and completely fine, right up until water finds its way in through a leaking fitting. Then it rots silently for years. The way you find it costs nothing. You take the handle of a screwdriver, or better a plastic mallet, and you tap along the deck, especially around every fitting, every stanchion base, every winch, every place a bolt goes through. A healthy deck answers with a sharp, hard, high sound. A rotten deck answers with a dull thud, like tapping a wet cardboard box. Walk the whole deck. Tap around the chain plates where the shrouds attach. Tap around the mast base. When the sound goes dull, you have just found a repair that can run anywhere from a few $1,000s to $20,000, depending on how far it's spread. I did not know that tap test on my West Sail. A friend showed me afterward, standing on my own soft deck, and I felt sick listening to how much of it thudded back at me. One afternoon with a screwdriver would have knocked $10,000 off my purchase price or sent me walking. Instead, I paid full retail for the privilege of finding out myself. But deck rot, as painful as it is, at least announces itself if you know how to listen. The next thing I want to warn you about gives you no warning at all, and it is the thing that has dropped rigs onto more decks than any storm. I am talking about the standing rigging and, worse, the chain plates buried behind your cabin walls. This is the invisible clock ticking inside every used sailboat, and it is where I want to stop and talk directly to those of you who already own your boat, because this next part is for you more than anyone. If you are watching this thinking it only helps the person shopping, stay with me right here, because I am about to give you something you can check on your own boat this weekend without a broker, without a haul out, without spending a dollar. This one thing has saved rigs, and it has saved lives. Your mast is held up by wire, and that wire is bolted to the hull through metal straps called chain plates. On a lot of production boats, those chain plates pass down through the deck and are attached to a bulkhead, a structural wall down inside the cabin. Water runs down the chain plate, sits where the metal meets the wood, and over the years it does two things. It corrodes the metal where you cannot see it, right at the water line of that joint, and it rots the wood the chain plate is bolted to. Either one can let go. Here is your free inspection. Go below, find where your shrouds come down through the deck, trace that line down to where the chain plate attaches inside, usually at the edge of a bulkhead or behind a panel. Look for rust streaks, look for staining on the wood. Press the wood with your thumb and feel if it is soft or spongy. Take a flashlight and look at the metal itself for any dark pitting or fine cracks near the bolts. If you see brown weeping stains coming out of that joint, that is not cosmetic. That is corrosion telling you it has already started. The reason this matters so much is the timeline. Marine surveyors and most insurance underwriters now treat standing rigging as having a service life of roughly 10 to 15 years or somewhere around 40,000 sea miles, whichever comes first. Many insurers will not renew a policy on a boat with rigging older than 15 years without an inspection or replacement. So, if you own a boat and the previous owner handed you no rigging receipts, you have to assume that clock has already expired. Budget for it. On a 35 to 40 foot boat, a full re-rig with new wire, new fittings, and new chain plates can run you anywhere from $8,000 to $18,000. I learned this from the buying side, but the lesson cuts both ways. When I finally sold my second boat, the thing that made buyers trust me instantly was a folder with the rigging invoice, dated with the rigger's name and the wire specification on it. Picture yourself standing below deck right now, flashlight in hand, staring at a rust streak weeping out of a bulkhead, and realizing you have no idea what that specific year and yard are famous for. That gap between what you can see and what you actually know is exactly the money pit I fell into, and it is exactly what the Complete Sail Smart System was built to close. Across all 3 volumes, you get the honest cost architecture of boat ownership nobody posts online, 6 bluewater ready boats, and exactly what they share, and the forensic financial comparison between a catamaran and a monohull with no mythology attached. It is the whole framework, from your first question to your final decision, written on real cost numbers instead of dealer optimism or forum folklore, and you can test the honesty of it tonight for free. Take any listing you have saved, find the build year, and go count how many pages of real content the landing page actually claims, because I promise the number is over 400 and it is all specifics. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. There is no launch gimmick here, just the plain fact that the moment your money moves, blind is the most expensive way to buy. So keep that folder idea in your head, because the receipts are what turn trust into a fast sale. That one folder was worth more than any wax job. If you own a boat right now, start that folder today, because the day you sell, it is the difference between a fast, honest sale and a buyer walking away like I walked away from a dozen sellers who had nothing to show me. Now here is where the tension tightens, because I have just told you about deck cores and rigging, and both of those you can at least inspect. The next problem is the one that hides inside the hull itself, and it is the one that made me realize the entire used market has a secret it does not want spoken. Let me tell you about blisters, and then let me tell you about the Valiant, because this is where the buried research lives. When you haul a fiberglass boat out of the water, sometimes you find the bottom covered in bumps under the paint, like the hull is broken out in a rash. Those are osmotic blisters. Water works its way through the outer skin of the fiberglass and reacts with the resin, and the pressure pushes little pockets of acidic fluid outward. Pop one and it smells like vinegar. On most boats, a mild case is a nuisance. A weekend of grinding and drying and barrier coat. On a bad boat, it is a full peel of the entire hull skin, and that job can cost you $15,000 to $25,000 and put the boat out of the water for a whole season while it dries. Here is the part almost nobody knows, and it is exactly the kind of buried fact that separates a real inspection from a hopeful one. Not all blistering is bad luck. Some of it was baked into the boat at the factory in specific years because of specific choices in the resin. The Valiant 40 is one of the most respected bluewater cruising boats ever built. Robert Perry designed it in 1973, and it became legendary for going anywhere, in any weather, and bringing its crew home. It is, by reputation, one of the safest passage-making hulls you can buy used. And yet, if you go looking at the boats built roughly between 1976 and 1981 at the Uniflight yard, you find a run of hulls that developed severe, persistent blistering that had nothing to do with neglect. The cause was the resin. During that period, the builder used a resin batch that, by many accounts, included a fire-retardant additive, and that chemistry made those hulls far more prone to blistering than the boats built before or after. Owners who did everything right, who maintained their boats meticulously, still hauled out to find the bottoms covered in blisters. The boat was excellent. The hull chemistry from those specific years was not, and a Valiant from that window can sell for noticeably less than one built later, precisely because the market learned this lesson the expensive way. Now sit with what that means. The most respected cruising builder in America produced a run of boats with a hidden defect tied to a specific range of years, and the only way to protect yourself is to know the years and the yard. That information is not in the listing. It is not in the broker's spec sheet. It survives in owner forums, in association archives, and in the memory of surveyors who were there. The knowledge exists. The people selling have every reason to let it stay buried. And when you walk up knowing to ask which year, which yard, which resin, you have just changed from prey into a buyer nobody can fool. That is the whole game right there. Every good used boat and every bad one has a set of these year-specific truths. The blister years, the bad batch of chain plates, the season they changed the keel bolts, the engine that was optional one year and standard the next. The people who know these things do not lose six figures. The people who do not know them fund everyone else's education. So the question becomes, how do you find those buried truths for the exact boat sitting in front of you when you are not a surveyor and you do not have 30 years at the end of a dock? That is what I promised you at the start, and that is what I want to hand you now, because when I finally learned this, it changed how I shopped forever. Here is the secret finale, and I want you to actually use it this week. Every fiberglass boat built in the United States since 1972 carries a hull identification number. It is a 12-character code, and by law it is molded or stamped into the hull, almost always on the upper starboard corner of the transom, the back right of the boat as you face it from behind. Most buyers glance at it, if they look at all, and think it is just a registration formality like a license plate. It is far more than that. That number tells you who built the boat and, crucially, when. The last characters encode the model year and the month the hull was actually laid up. Not the year it was sold, not the year on the pretty listing, the real birthday of that specific hull, straight from the factory, stamped where it cannot be edited by an optimistic seller. Here is why that is the most powerful free tool you have. Once you know the exact build date of the hull, you can cross-reference it against the year-specific troubles for that model, the way we just did with the Valiant blister years. You take that build date to the Owners Association forum for that model, you search the refit logs, you ask the one question that terrifies a seller who is hiding something, you ask, what was different about the hulls built in this specific year at this specific yard? Let me show you how this plays out on the dock. You walk up, you find the hull identification number on the transom before you even go aboard. You read the real build date, then you go inside and you tap the deck around every fitting. You go below and you check the chain plates for rust streaks and soft wood. You ask for the rigging receipts and you note whether the wire is older than 15 years. And you take that real build date home and you spend one evening in the owner's forum learning what that exact year is famous for, good or bad. That entire process costs you nothing but an evening and a screwdriver. And it is the difference between the man I was at 49, handing over $38,000 on a handshake and a binder of old photographs, and the man I became 5 years later who bought a boat for less, knew every weakness before he signed, and never once got surprised by a bill he did not see coming. Because here is the truth I paid so dearly to learn. The reason sailboats never became popular is not that the dream was wrong. The dream is real. The water is still out there waiting. The reason is that the industry made it far too easy to buy the wrong boat and far too hard to know why it was wrong. They sold the dream and buried the maintenance. They wrote the listings to hide the decay, and a whole generation of good people bought beautiful boats that quietly ate their savings and then swore off the whole idea and told their friends it was too expensive and too much trouble. It does not have to be your story. The boats that reward you are still out there, and now you know how to tell them apart from the ones that will bleed you. You know to read the real hull date off the transom instead of trusting the listing. You know to tap the deck and listen for the wet cardboard thud. You know to trace the chain plates and look for the rust weeping out of the wood. You know that rigging has a 15-year clock and that no receipts means the clock has run out. And you know that even the best builder in the country had bad years and that the year is knowable if you just go and look. The people who did the homework before the money moved are the ones sailing today. The people who trusted the shine are the ones with a for sale sign and a story about how sailing just is not worth it. You already decided which one you want to be the moment you clicked on this, and I would not have made this for anyone else. So let me ask you something, and I really do want you to answer. Which boat is on your short list right now? Tell me the model and the year you are looking at down in the comments, and if you know the yard it was built in, tell me that too, because half the time I can tell you what that specific year is famous for. And tell me where you are watching from, whether you're staring at a listing in Florida or dreaming through a long winter up north. I read them, and I answer the ones I can. If you found this useful, subscribe and stand with the rest of us who refuse to get burned by a pretty listing and a fast-talking broker. This is a group of buyers who do the homework, and there is room for you in it. And come back for the next one, because I am going to break down the one engine question that sinks more used boat deals than blisters and rot combined. There is a decade of marine diesels out there that look identical on the dipstick and could not be more different under the valve cover, and if you buy the wrong one, you will pay for a repower you never planned. I will tell you the exact engines to walk toward and the exact ones to walk away from, and the year everything changed. Do not buy anything with an inboard diesel until you have heard it. I will see you there. Let me leave you with the thing I say to every friend who calls me before they sign. The boat is never the deal. The knowledge is the deal. I paid $15,000 in surprises to learn what a screwdriver in one evening on a forum could have told me for free, and I am still a little angry about it, which is exactly why I keep telling you, go find the hull number, read the real date, tap the deck, trace the chain plates, ask for the receipts. Do those 5 things on the next boat you look at, and you will already know more than the man who is trying to sell it to you. That is how you keep your savings in your pocket instead of in somebody else's transom, and that is how the dream finally becomes yours instead of the thing that got away. Before you go, one thing. This video showed you the shape of the trouble, but inside the cruising compass I walk you through the full pre-purchase inspection, hull to rigging, right where we left off. Ask me your own questions about the boat you're eyeing, and I answer you myself, not some machine. You belong here with fellow sailboat buyers. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime. One click. I'd love to have you aboard. Now, if this made you curious about sailing for yourself, I've got something you'll love. Next, I'll show you an honest, gentle way to get into a cruising sailboat without spending a fortune. It's starting right here.